This is OTR FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Welcome to Cracked, the podcast, the program that slays the dragons of mental health by stripping away the shame, embarrassment, fear, and stigma. Because mental health isn't something that affects just some of us, it applies to all of us. Here to shine a new light on areas of mental health that often go unvisited are your hosts, Rebecca Shaper and Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello, and welcome to Crack the Podcast, Slaying the Dragons of Mental Health, with me, Sandy Sedgbeer.
And me, Rebecca Shaper.
Now, there are many therapies aimed at helping people cope with psychological distress, depression, and anxiety, and most are aimed at helping sufferers get rid of their bad thoughts and their feelings and encouraging good ones. Today, we're taking a look at a successful new evidence-based approach that not only is helping people make room for their uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, but also helps improve one's relationships, develop healthier exercise and eating behaviors, cope better with pain or health conditions, and even make positive changes in the world. It's called Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, otherwise known as ACT. And with us today to tell us about it is Diana Hill, PhD, who together with her co-author, Dr. Debbie Sorensen, has produced the ACT Daily Journal, which offers a practical, guided 8-week program for integrating the core processes of acceptance and commitment therapy. Dr. Diana Hill, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to talk to you today about ACT and how we can use it to build more flexible lives.
Now, you're a licensed clinical psychologist based in California and Colorado. You've studied biopsychology, which is the physiology and neuroscience of behavior, and as a pre-med student at the University of California, Santa Barbara. You've also pursued a PhD in clinical psychology at the University of Colorado before completing a year-long pre-doctoral internship at University of California. What made you want to go in this particular direction?
Well, I think my ACT journey goes back quite a long ways. I struggled myself with an eating disorder, and in some ways you can think about eating disorder as the ultimate attempt to control the uncontrollable, right? Whether we're controlling our bodies or trying to control the discomfort that shows up under our skin. And in my journey of recovery from my eating disorder, I used a lot of skills and practices through mindfulness. I studied with Thich Nhat Hanh in Plum Village. My dad was very involved in close with mindfulness practices, and I also practiced yoga. But I took the route of clinical psychology because I also was very interested in the science of it all and the science of behavior change. And when I came to the University of Colorado at Boulder, I came with the intention of really helping people be able to overcome whatever it is that they were stuck in their lives. And in particular, at that time, I was studying eating disorders. But what I found along the way is that ACT offers sort of this place of an intersection between what we know from behavioral science and psychological science about how people get stuck and why people get stuck, and also this wisdom from contemplative practices like yoga, like mindfulness. And ACT is really a space that allows people to get clear on their values and move in directions that matter to them. And ultimately, that's what I do for myself in my own life and my own recovery and working with clients, and also what I want to promote through my teachings and through my book and other offerings.
CBT is another type of therapy. Could you give us some examples why ACT opens up more awareness to self-development and helps us to think out of the box?
Sure. Well, ACT is actually considered a third wave, sort of a modern approach to therapy. And it really was built from cognitive behavioral approaches or CBT. But
Mhm.
ACT takes more of an acceptance based approach to things like our thoughts. So, a lot of times with traditional cognitive behavioral approaches, we would teach people how to change their thoughts or identify a maladaptive thought and come up with the evidence to support or dispute it. But in ACT, we take more of an approach of thoughts are just part of what the human brain does. It's producing thoughts all the time. And our thoughts tend to be a little bit negatively biased. They tend to be searching for what's wrong.
Mhm.
And really, what we can do is instead of trying to change our thoughts or battle our thoughts, is get a little bit of space from them. And I could do it. I could do a experiential exercise to demonstrate this with you, Rebecca, if you like, if you wouldn't mind doing something with me.
Sure,
Go
absolutely.
for it.
That's
Be
great.
psychologically flexible and try it
Yeah,
out. Okay.
absolutely.
So one of the things that happens is when we have difficult thoughts, they can really cloud our vision and they can push us around. They can kind of be like bullies inside of our own heads, right? And everybody has thoughts
Mhm.
that are problematic, right?
Right.
So do you have any difficult thought that shows up for you that bothers you or maybe gets in the way in your day? It could be anything from I don't want to, or an anxious thought, or even a positive thought about yourself, but that kind of steers your direction a little bit. Any thought that you struggle with?
Well, I would think a positive thought I wouldn't so much struggle with,
Uh-huh.
but probably a thought is for me is I love to be able to do everything and put everything in one day. And in other words, if I want to be outside in nature, if I want to do some work, if I want to do this, then I get a little cranky if I can't fit it all in one day. So for me,
Perfect.
that's kind of like a negative thought, but then I just have to I think about it. But I'll let you explain it through.
That's perfect because many of us struggle with that of, I
Mhm.
want to pack it all in. I need to, or I have to do
Yep,
X, Y, and Z today.
yep,
And it could even be linked to like a positive thing. I want to feel fulfilled in my day. Like these could be wonderful things. But what happens if you can imagine writing that thought, I have to pack everything in today, or I have to do everything on my list today. Imagine writing that on the palm of your hand. Okay. I have to fit everything in today. Hold up your hand for me, Rebecca.
okay,
Imagine that thought, I need to fit everything in today, is on your hand. And then
okay.
hold your hand right up to your face, really close to your eyes, right up over your eyes. How well can you see me when you're entangled in that I have to get everything done today thought? If it's right up to your eyes, right in front of your eyes.
Do you want it like this or like
Yeah,
this?
like that. Yeah.
Like this?
Like
Oh,
covering your vision. Like
I
that's all
don't,
you see.
I don't
Yeah.
see you at all.
You don't
Ab-
see me at all.
Right.
Yeah. And
But
how well can you see your thought? I have to get everything packed in today.
I don't.
Right. Okay. So we often are entangled in our thoughts like that. We can't even see the person in front of us because we're
Right,
in our own heads.
right, right,
Or we can't even see our day because we're so entangled in everything that I have to do today, right?
right,
So
right.
then here's what I want you to do. Take your hand and move it away from your face.
Okay.
Okay. And now with a little bit away from your face, how well can you see me? If you were to open your eyes.
Oh, I can see you now.
And could you turn your head and look at your thought if you needed to look at your thought?
Absolutely.
Okay. So notice that I didn't cut off your hand. I didn't write a new thought on your hand. I didn't tie your hand behind your back. What we did is got a little bit of space from our thoughts. And then you get to choose where you place your attention. You're the chooser, not your thoughts. And
Exactly.
that's the different angle that ACT takes around thoughts. There's 6 core processes that are sort of like the 6 sides of a Rubik's Cube that together build your psychological flexibility. And one of those core processes is called cognitive diffusion. We're often fused, like 2 pieces of metal fused to our thoughts. We can't see the world because we're so caught up in our heads. In ACT, you get a little bit of space from your thoughts. And this maps on to contemplative practices, right? So when you're meditating or you're practicing a contemplative practice, your job isn't to like shoot down thoughts. It's to allow thoughts in and allow thoughts to go and just see them as passing phenomena in our minds. In ACT, we teach that as a skill to help you get a little bit of freedom from your head so you can move into your life with your hands and your feet.
Okay, I like
The-
that. I like that exercise too.
Yeah, we're
I
going to do
mean,
lots of exercises today because ACT is experiential.
yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing is,
Moving in the directions that matter to us in our life, right? So with ACT, I mentioned those 6 sides of a Rubik's Cube.
Mm-hmm.
One of the sides is how do we respond to our thoughts? How do we get out of our heads and into our life? That's one of the co-founders, Stephen Hayes, his workbook, Get Out of Your Head and Into Your Life, right? That's one side of it. But another side of that Rubik's Cube of helping you develop psychological flexibility is having some clarity around what matters to you. What's most important here? And so, Rebecca, when you're talking about your day and you have all these things that are important and you want to get done, there's also sort of a practice of it's not as much about getting the things done. It's not as much as about finishing the Rubik's Cube so it can sit on your counter.
Right.
Because a Rubik's Cube that's perfect on the counter is one that no one will play with.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's perfect. Don't touch the Rubik's Cube.
Right.
I got everything done on my list, right? But it's more about how are you doing those things? What are the qualities of action that you want to bring to the different domains of your life? So if on that list is gardening, or on that list is having coffee with a friend, or on that list is writing something, your values would be, how do I want to be while I'm writing? Do I want to be present? Do I want to be creative? Do I want to be compassionate with myself, right? How do I want to be when I'm gardening? Do I want to be engaged? Do I want to be like the qualities that we bring to our life experiences? And so values is one of those sides, and I hope we can get through all the sides of this Rubik's Cube, but values is one of those sides of the Rubik's Cube that have to do with what really matters to you most in this moment, and how are you pursuing that? It's verbs and adverbs, actions that you take in your life that line up with the type of person that you want to be in the world. And that really does set ACT apart from traditional cognitive behavioral therapies as well, because it's not about what the therapist thinks is important to you. Their personal values are personal and chosen by you. Just like my favorite color may be gray and your favorite color may be green. Gray is not better than green.
Right.
Personal and chosen. And deep inside each of us, we know, we have an inner knowing of what's important to us and what our values are. And that inner knowing traces along through our whole, through our whole life. It's sort of like that tuning fork.
Mm-hmm.
You can tune in and make adjustments.
Yes.
how deep can this go?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it can go very deep. I mean, if we think about this sort of concept of transcendence, when ACT was developed, it was actually developed by Stephen Hayes, who's known as this very well-known researcher at University of Nevada. Well, he came to some of these concepts from his own panic disorder and being on the floor screaming one day because he was in such misery. And his very first paper actually that preceded this work was about spirituality. So he also includes, and when we talk about these core processes, one of the core processes, another side of that Rubik's Cube, is the transcendent self, of being able to step into a version of you that is in our book, the book that Debbie and I wrote together, we talk about it as our sky mind, stepping into a version of you that is spacious and expansive and transcends time. Because there's you that's sitting in the timeline of your life, like we're sitting here now on this day at this point in time. But there's also a you that travels way back in time, and even before you were born, that travels back. And we know epigenetically that you carry the genes of your ancestors. Their trauma is in your body, right? And there's a you that will travel forward in time, that will transcend into the future. And we can even call upon that future self. Sometimes I'll work with clients, or I'll work with myself. Like if I call upon my future self, what would she say is most important to me right now? What would be her advice to me? What would be her wisdom? What would be her compassionate tone towards me? So in ACT, we can step into this transcendent version of ourselves, and it helps us unlock from the self-stories that we have about ourselves, so that we're boxed in, beliefs about ourselves, beliefs about others, into a grander view and a grander perspective. And I would see that as pretty deep.
Yeah.
Pretty deep.
Absolutely. Yes. That's very well put. Because for me, I notice that if I get a thought about something that doesn't feel good, like a negative thought, I'm able to switch it pretty quickly, because I think of something similar to what you're talking about. But for me, it's being very conscious. You have to be very conscious of your thoughts, to me, that in order to, have that space and then just allow.
Yeah, so you're also tapping into, and the reason why I keep on going back to this Rubik's Cube, these 6 sides, is I feel like it's orienting, like this is a methodology that can have a lot of complexity to it. But what you're also alluding to is another side of that cube, which is being present, being conscious, being present. And in ACT, the approach that we take is that many of us can't be present all of the time,
Right.
but we can be present when it matters to us. So when my kid, I have 2 young boys that I just adore and that also drive me nuts. When they come up to me and I'm working and I'm on my phone working on something, or on my computer working on something, and they want to show me their Lego thing that they care about. For me, that's a moment that matters to be present in. It's important. And it's important to me because it connects to my values. It connects to looking at my kid in the eye and acknowledging that they are never going to be this young again, and neither am I.
Right.
Impermanence, like right here, right now, what really matters is my child, and also for him to see me caring about what he cares about. Right? I don't really care about the Legos. I care about him seeing that I care about what he cares about. Right? We can do that in our partnerships too, and in our friendships. Right?
Yeah.
And then the second part of it is I want to, and I care about, and I value modeling to him how to be engaged with another human in this world of technology. Because there will be a point in time when his future self and my future self is, where he's 14 and he's on his phone. And I hope that he will put down his phone and look at me in the eyes too. Right. So that's being present where it matters. And all sorts of other things will pull me away from that. Oh, this is an important thing that I need to finish. My thoughts. Oh, I just one more, blah, 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 blah. Or my distracted, or I don't really want to look at the Lego. It's not really interesting to me. Like all sorts of stuff shows up under our skin. And with ACT, we use these 6 skills, these 6 processes to help us orient over and over again through the little moments of our life to be engaged in the ways that we want to be engaged that matter to us. So that's one of the core processes of being present. And it also kind of reflects another core process, which is about accepting and allowing. Because oftentimes when we're pursuing what matters to us, it's uncomfortable. If you think about the things that you care most about in your life, most likely they've also associated with the most discomfort. The things that we pursue often have the shadow side that shows up because you care about it. It's where Steve Hayes would say is you hurt where you care. You hurt where you care. And so being able to open up, accept, and allow, and make room and make space to be willing for our full life experience is one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves, and opens us to the possibility of a more rich and fulfilling life.
Basically, what you're doing is reminding people that every moment matters, and that's something that we forget to acknowledge. We race through the moments of our day because we want to fit so much in that we forget that every moment matters.
Yeah. We race through our day, and there's actually a concept that I'm particularly interested in. I've been writing and talking about more, which is the concept of striving. And we race through our day, and we often strive for some future point in time when we will be happy or when we will have more, not only because of the dopamine that's associated with pursuit, right? When we're in drive mode, dopamine is being released. And actually, ironically, as soon as you actually obtain that which you are pursuing, dopamine drops and you feel less satisfied. So you go pursue the next thing. So we strive for that reason, but we also strive, or we engage in this drive brain, because we are also avoiding the discomfort of living. The slowing down and being present in our lives as they are right now may expose some things about your life that are uncomfortable. Yeah. And so we can go into working, and we can go into doing, and we see the speed of our world that's just rapid. I mean, I work with, executives, I work with college students, I work with graduate students, and the speed at which they live is unbelievable, right? And some of it is the avoidance of feeling being in their bodies. I mean, even just the practice of, am I in my head right now or in my body? And what's in here in this wilderness of my body, right? It's uncomfortable in here. There's sadness in here. There's longings in here. There's cravings in here. There's all sorts of things in the wilderness of our bodies or the wilderness of the present moment that we avoid by doing or by engaging in doing mind. And in ACT, we call it sort of this, what's called the experiential avoidance roundabout, or Debbie and I called it that. And the reason why I called it a roundabout, and for you in the UK, Sandy, you may appreciate this. In California, we don't know anything about roundabouts, and they're actually a very good strategy for dealing with traffic,
Yes.
but we don't know about how to deal with roundabouts, and they plop in the middle of our town. And you want to see a bunch of Californians start to scramble. You get on the roundabout and you're going around and around and around and around. And oftentimes you have to do very things, right? So stuck behaviors, our stuck habit loops that we are in, right? We get in these habits of experiential avoidance. But to get out of the roundabout, you have to change lanes and you got to exit. And that is anxiety provoking. It requires a good amount of courage if you're a Californian on a roundabout. And it also requires like willingness to be uncomfortable. So oftentimes we're engaged in experiential avoidance. We're avoiding what's under our skin. Our roundabouts aren't going around in circles in cars. Our roundabouts are, at the end of the day, I'm stressed and so I'm eating. Or at the end of the day, I'm stressed, so I'm drinking. Or in the moment with my partner, I'm frustrated, and so I'm spewing negativity and anger towards him to avoid the feeling that I'm having. But in order to escape the roundabout, you have to actually move through and be with and open and allow the very thing that you are terrified of. But once you're out of the roundabout, you can go on any street in town you want. And that is psychological freedom. Right? So if we think about the habits that we're caught in, the addictions, whether it's an addiction to striving or it's an addiction technology, we are in a roundabout of suffering. And this is the modern day samsara, right? We're in a roundabout of suffering. And what is it, that allows us, frees us from our suffering? And this is, part of the Four Noble Truths, right? Like, life is uncomfortable. There's a cause for our discomfort. Freedom is possible. The freedom is opening up, allowing, making room for discomfort while pursuing what it is that we care most about. And that will free us up to then drive around wherever we want to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes total sense. And what advice do you give to the person that is just stuck and doesn't want to get off the exit?
I say start with being with your stuckness. I mean, oftentimes when we are stuck, we are looking to get unstuck. But what if the first step of being stuck is being stuck? Where do you feel the stuckness in your body? Is it in your belly? Is it in your throat? If the stuckness had a shape, what shape would it be? If it were moving, how would it be moving? Right? And then you could have a conversation with your stuckness. Hey, stuckness, where are you here? How long have you been here? Oh, you're back. I remember you. You showed up when I was 13. I remember that stuck spot, right? And you're here again, right? So this is some of the, if you think about some of these ancient practices of feeding your inner demons, or ancient practices of, being, welcoming the unwelcome, like Pema Chodron's work. But I think that in modern day psychology, we often just move straight to get unstuck, right? And even the title of my book is ACT Daily Journal, Get Unstuck. But I really believe that getting unstuck starts with being with stuckness. Step one, that's the acceptance and allowing part of that Rubik's Cube. But there's one part I've been tracking which ones we've been around. So we've been through cognitive diffusion, stepping back from your thoughts, accepting, values, perspective taking, allowing. The last strategy of that Rubik's Cube in ACT is something called committed action. And committed action draws upon the behavioral science of behavior change, right? Of getting unstuck from things. So we start with being with our stuckness. But I would say you also need to take a step at some point.
Right.
I mean, I hear
what you're saying, but I mean, I'm sure there are some people out there that just can't get beyond that stuckness.
Yeah.
And help me out on that. I mean,
Okay, so I'll help you on that. So I'll tell another story because I believe in storytelling as a way of, as you can tell, from roundabouts to
I love
robots. We're
it.
going to talk about
Yeah.
robots. So my brother-in-law, he designs robot brains, and he worked initially with military robots. Thank goodness he's out of that area, and he's now doing driverless cars, which I approve of more. But so he worked with military robots, and he said that one of the things that he designed into robots was a get unstuck button. He actually called it that, a get unstuck button. And what the get unstuck button that he programmed into robots was supposed to do is, if a robot was stuck, like it was like in a tunnel and it couldn't get out, it was supposed to do every single possible behavior that the robot can do, except for what it's doing. So it can do backflips, it can bang its head against the wall, it can go backwards, it can go forwards and go sideways. Just don't do what you're doing. That's the first step of getting unstuck. Because if we look at behavior psychology and repertoires of behavior, oftentimes our attempts to get unstuck are doing the very things that we've been doing forever that have been keeping us stuck. And cognitive flexibility or psychological flexibility is the capacity to try something different, try something different again. And then if you get like a tiny bit of wiggle room, like an inch of wiggle room, reinforce that. Reinforce it and try a little bit more. And these are tiny, little, tiny baby moves. So say I am stuck. I mean, what's something that we get stuck in? Gosh, we get stuck in addictions all the time, right? So I'm stuck in my addiction to eating in the evening, right? Or my addiction to drinking in the evening, or my addiction to smoking, right? So what if we were just to kind of put a little something different in there? First, I'd be present with my stuckness, but maybe I could get creative in inserting another little behavior that's more linked to my values, that also tends to the core need that I'm really seeking. Like maybe I really am seeking some soothing or some downtime, or maybe I'm seeking some connection. Like again, why is this stuckness here? And then tending to the authentic need there, and then savoring and being in the savoring process of the feeling of actually giving yourself what it is that you long for. And that's the reinforcement part of behavioral psychology, right? So getting unstuck is sort of like getting creative, really, I think, is the root.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having more compassion for yourself.
Yeah.
You know, okay, I'm feeling stuck. I can't get beyond that stuckness, but it's okay. Just allowing, and, you know, just let it. Yeah. I won't go any further, but
well, compassion is important. And actually, when Debbie Sorensen and I wrote the book, the first chapter, the first of those 8 weeks, it's called Preparing the Ground. We're both gardeners. I'm a homesteader here in Santa Barbara. I keep bees and have a garden and chickens for eggs, do a little sort of biodynamic gardening. But with compassion, you can think about it as it's creating the nutrient dense soil for you to be able to plant your seeds in. And any gardener that gardens, or any farmer really, knows that it's about the soil, right? Like you need good soil for anything to grow. No matter how good the seed is, it's not going to grow unless the soil is nutrient dense. So the way that we conceive it is that psychological flexibility will grow. These skills of psychological flexibility, the get unstuck skills, will grow much more healthier, I guess, if the soil of compassion is there. And I would say it's not just self-compassion, it's the flows of compassion. I study someone by the name of Paul Gilbert, and I've interviewed him a couple of times on the Psychologist Off the Clock podcast, which I podcast with Debbie Sorensen and some of my other colleagues. But the flows of compassion are 3 things. So it's being able to receive compassion, take in compassion, giving compassion to others, and then giving compassion to yourself. And all of us tend to kind of struggle with some of them, right? Sometimes we struggle with receiving compassion. Sometimes we would struggle with giving it to ourselves. And sometimes we struggle with giving it to another. But that's really the soil in which, if we can use that sort of our social brain, the brain that's designed to be content and connected, the tend and befriend part of our brain, it can help us with that drive part of our brain that's overstimulated, and then our threat system that's also overstimulated, especially in our modern day society.
We're going to take a a small break here. I'm still getting feedback in my head. You're listening to Crack the Podcast with me, Sandy Sedgbeer, and my co-host, Rebecca Shaper. And we're speaking with Dr. Diana Hill about her book, Act Daily Journal. Get unstuck and live fully with acceptance and commitment therapy. We'll be back in a few moments after the break.
The Real Conscious Connection. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going Om. My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Worried about your friend but don't know how to reach out?
You could say how are you or get a fake tattoo. You could ask with an app if it works for you. You could chat with them in VR. It's so good. If you think you should check in, yeah, you should.
Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health.
Whatever gets you talking.
Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org.
Welcome back. Dr. Diana Hill, there was one part that we didn't get to speak about before the break, which is perspective taking.
Yeah, well, perspective taking is actually that transcendent self that I was talking about, that being able to take perspective on your own life, being able to take perspective on your self stories. But I have a fun perspective taking exercise. That if you want to do one with me, that would be a fun one for our listeners to do too. So with perspective taking, it can really help us when we're caught up in self stories about ourselves. And we know that we're caught up in a self story when we start saying things like, I am not, I always, I never, I can't, I should, right? And those self-stories can really limit our ability to move about in our lives. Some of these self-stories we've adopted when we were small children, and we've held on to them. Like, I'm bad at math. We may even steer our career away from anything related to the flavor of math just because we have that self-story that I'm bad at math. Or for me, it's, I don't like going fast. I don't go fast. I don't take risks. I'm not a risk taker. And so I'll do all sorts of things to not take risks and never actually challenge that self-story. So self-stories, actually, when we have positive self-stories, they can also be limiting, because sometimes we can have self-stories like, I'm a good writer. And what about those times when your paper doesn't get accepted or your book gets rejected? Does that mean that you've lost everything because you're a good writer? We are much more than our mind, what our mind tells us about who we are. So I want to do a little exercise on a self-story, and you could pick a positive one or a negative one, but one that's pretty rigid that you hold on to that keeps you stuck. And I'm going to ask each of you, Sandy and Rebecca, for a self-story. And I'll give you one of mine first, just to break the ice while you're thinking. So one of my self-stories that I've held for a long time is that I'm not doing enough. And really, it's that I'm not good enough. And that self-story has led me into things like becoming the Olympian of good enough, called anorexia. Right? So even these self stories that are very old for us can show up again, and I can tell it when it shows up. So do either of you have a self story that you've held for a while or that keeps you stuck that you want to share with us?
I'll go with mine. Mine is being more present with my husband. I love him dearly, and yeah. What were you going
Do
to
you have
say?
a story? Do you have a story like I am, I always, I never, that gets you stuck around that, like that prevents you from being present with your husband? Like I always need to work more, or
Okay, how about I need to work more to be more present with my husband?
okay, I need
Is
to
that
work more. Okay, good. Okay. How about for you, Sandy?
I've got one. And it's something that I was going to bring up a little bit later. It is that I really don't like doing exercises in books.
Perfect. Okay.
So I was going to ask you, how would I work with yours if I
Yeah.
don't like doing exercises? But
No.
now you're going to cue me of that.
I'm giving you an exercise on not liking exercises. This is perfect. This is psychological flexibility for you in action, Sandy, committed action right here, right now. So, okay. So I need to work more to be present with my husband, and I don't like doing exercises in books. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I want you to write that story down, like write it as a sentence. I need to be more present. I need to do more to be present with my husband. And I don't like doing exercises in books. Write it down. Like, get out your pen. I'm actually making you do it.
I don't have a pen with
it.
me,
You
but
can
I
type
do
it in
have
the
it
chat.
written down in front of me.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, actually, you could even type it in the chat if you wanted to. So imagine that sentence is written out. I need to do more to be present with my husband, and I don't like doing exercises in books. Okay. Good. Sandy's writing it out. She's actually doing it. I see it in the chat. I should take a picture of it. So now what I want you to do is I want you to, after that sentence, put a comma and put the word sometimes. Sometimes. And now, Sandy, I want you to say out loud the sentence with the sometimes. Say it out loud.
I don't like doing exercises in books sometimes.
Okay. And Rebecca, can you say your sentence out loud?
Sure. I want to be more present with my husband sometimes.
That's good. Okay. Now this may be, this would be, since we're doing this on the computer, you can do it on the computer, but I want you to just take a moment to circle in your mind the word I am. Okay. So I don't like doing exercises in books sometimes. And then there's just a me, right? There's a me behind that story. There's a me behind, sometimes I want to be present with my husband. Sometimes I don't. And that me is a bigger me. It's not me and the small ego me that doesn't like something, or the me and the small ego me that's like, I need to work harder at being present with my husband. But there's a bigger me. Mm-hmm. It's not even a me. It's like a grander perspective of like, I am. In yoga, I'm a yoga practitioner and teacher. One of the chants that I often chant is Hamsa, which just means I am that. She is that. We are that. We are more than the stories that our mind creates. Right. And oftentimes we can get caught in the, I don't like doing exercises in books, so we won't even pick up the book. I don't journal. They slapped journal right on the front cover of my book, and I didn't want that in the title, but the publisher did, right? Because this is more than a journal. It's a program, it's a process, it's a way of engaging in the world. But let me tell you, lots of people won't pick up the book because it says journal on it. I don't do journals, right? Mm-hmm. And so therefore we block ourselves to the possibility of what lies within. Because what lies within this book is all sorts of things. There's stories in there, there's exercises, there's prompts, there's specific examples. And you get to choose the me, that I am bigger than all of these like beliefs about myself. You get to choose how you're going to engage with this. So what if, Sandy, you were to pick this up and say, hey, part of my psychological flexibility practice is to step into something that I don't like. Because if we step into things that we don't like on a regular basis, we may actually start to realize that, gosh, there's a lot more world out there outside of the roundabout of avoiding things that we don't like. There's streets we haven't even gone on because we've been stuck on this roundabout of I don't like to do that. For me, when I was in my late 30s, I don't like risk taking, and my son wanted to learn how to surf. I'd grown up in Santa Barbara. I'd never gotten on a surfboard in my life. But in pursuit of my values of being present with my son and engaging in new things and supporting him in what he loves, I went out there. And it wasn't about getting up or standing up or doing anything that had to do with surfing. It was about moving into the possibility of something grander and connecting with him. Right. So that's, I guess, a bit of your answer to this concept of perspective taking, which is one of these sides of psychological flexibility. And each of these, you can just, they're like Russian dolls, right? You can just keep on going further and further and deeper into them. But really at their source, at their essence, is something that we already know. It's not something new. It's something you already know.
It's that, I just recognized a story behind that story. Why do I not like doing exercises? Well, because I tell myself, I don't have time.
Yeah.
So what's behind that? There's another one behind that, that life is too busy or something.
Right. I don't have time. I don't have time.
Like a domino effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that belief system of like not having time is one that many of us are caught up in right now. I don't have time for that. And what we end up not doing is giving ourselves the time, or even transcending time, or even seeing. There's somebody by the name of Stefan Reichshafen who founded Omega Institute and is now at Costa Rica. And he's become a friend of mine. I'm actually bringing a group of folks to Costa Rica in April 22 to do psychological flexibility training in combination with yoga in a blue zone. It's called Stack Your Life to build what you want to offer and what you want to be in. But he talks about this concept of time shifting and how our perception of time is a very interesting one, and how we manipulate, sort of we base things on this idea of time. But really, when it comes down to it, you and I are right now engaging in an exercise, Sandy, while you're also engaging in your work, while you're also engaging in what sounds like a friendship. So you're starting to do what I call a values-rich behavior, which is being able to build our values into the very lives that we're living. So for me as a yoga teacher, I sit for a living. I'm a therapist. I sit for a living. Well, I love to move, and I have a back. I have a crooked spine, and so it's important for me to be able to take care of my body, right? So I started sitting on the floor.
Oh.
And why am I sitting on the floor? Because if I sit on the floor, I can stretch my legs out to the side. And all of a sudden, I'm in a yoga pose. And when I get up and down from the floor, I'm doing a squat or I'm lunging. And all of a sudden, I don't have time for yoga, but yoga is built into my very being, the way that I live. So the way that humans design things is we compartmentalize. We compartmentalize ourselves, our egos from other people, but we also compartmentalize our lives as if we need to move with something. That's an hour I do at 5 o'clock. That's not what I do in the rest of my day. Or I don't have time for these exercises. Well, the reason why we wrote this book in the way that we wrote it was that we very much wanted you to build these practices into your life. We don't want this to be something that you have to carve out time for. This is something that this 2-minute prompt that you look at the page for the day of, I'm working on acceptance this week. Here's a 2-minute prompt that you then will bring into your day that you don't have time for, but you don't need time for, because it's already built in. Practicing acceptance in the here and now while I'm just accepting the physical sensations with my body, or I'm being present with you. It doesn't have to be some separate thing. Yeah.
That's called total presence and awareness.
Yeah.
Really. Really being aware and conscious and present.
How would this work for somebody who has something like deep anxiety or depression, which is really hard to get motivated for people with depression? How would you employ this?
Yeah. Well, I really believe that values and pain are two sides of the same coin, or that's what we often say and act. And in the book, we say they're joined at the hip. So often, when we are really, really stuck, like we're in depression, and we can actually turn towards the thing that is causing us the most pain to uncover what it is that really we care about. So, for example, I'll use anxiety as an example, social anxiety. Oh, it's the worst. Like it's one of the most common things that people struggle with. They want to go and like, go on a date or engage with a friend group, and all of a sudden it feels like you have spotlights on you, and every single word you're saying is like being broadcast, and you're embarrassed, and you feel. And why is social anxiety exist? Because we care about connection. We want to belong. I want to belong so badly that I have this extreme anxiety around it. I long to belong. And so when we can start to look at what are the values underneath there, like what is it that I really am longing for, right? Something like depression. Maybe sometimes we're depressed because we long to have a sense of purpose and meaning in the world, and we feel so far from that, right? Or we have this shame and this shroud of like self, like real self critical thoughts, right? And underneath that is actually maybe a longing for something. So when we can get to the longing and we can start to pursue the longing, I long to belong. How can I feel belonging in this moment? How can I pursue a sense of belonging? How can I make contact with that which was painful for myself? Then it helps us be able to carry the pain of life as we pursue what we care about. So with ACT, we could use any sides of that Rubik's Cube. It may be something with depression. One of the most effective treatments for depression is very simple behavioral activation, tiny, tiny, tiny behaviors. It'll be, okay, so today, what would be the ultimate form of self-care? It may just be, can I get up and take a shower today? That would be the first thing. And when I'm in the shower, can I feel the shower? And can I notice my depressed thoughts and the I don't want tos, and just pay attention to the shower on my skin and taking in the good. This is Rick Hanson's positive neuroplasticity, taking in the good of the feeling of the shower, because that's the only good that I can feel right now. And that's enough. And then we build on that little tiny, tiny, tiny steps towards the life that we want.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
What about people for instance, in my family, my mother was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and my brother was as well, which today, I don't really truly believe that was the diagnosis, but I won't go further into that. What are your thoughts about people who, quote, are diagnosed with schizophrenia? Because that's a totally different type of illness than just depression. I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Well, interestingly, ACT has been used with psychosis. Because if you think about something like with psychosis, you're having hallucinations and you're having thoughts, right? So you can actually work with people to, when you have a hallucination or a thought, to be able to see it as that. It's a hallucination and it's a thought. And I can still engage in what I'm trying to engage in right here, like doing my work, like having this this thought, but I can still engage in my meaningful work, right? Some of our ACT is less about disorders and diseases and diagnoses as they are about ways in which we are stuck in our lives and what would help us kind of free us up to be able to pursue our values. So I would say in the category of something like, and I'm not a specialist in major mental illness. I did work in a bipolar disorder clinic where a lot of people experience hallucinations and as part of mania. But I would say that with ACT, sometimes medications are helpful for people, because just like if you had diabetes, medication is helpful. Medication is helpful, and so is dietary changes, and so is movement, and so is all sorts of things. I would say I'm not a complete never take a medication. Some of these mental health conditions really benefit from having some medication in combination with sort of what's the why there, because when you are using medications, there's a lot of side effects. There's a lot of there's a lot of work you have to do to maintain that regimen. And at the same time, it's more about what's a rich and fulfilling life for you, and what does that look like. And for some people, it may be using medications. For some people, it may not be using medications, and maybe pursuing other paths towards their mental health and wellness. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No,
Because it's sort of,
it does.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
Diana, in your bio, you say that you were clinical director of the La Luna Center in Colorado, and you describe it as an intensive outpatient center for eating disorders that embraces feminine and holistic integrative approaches to healing. I'm curious about the use of the word feminine there.
I would say the balance of the yin yang, really. So the yin being the qualities of and everyone has yin yang inside of them. So I would say the qualities of embracing the feminine, embracing the emotional side, embracing, and these are traditionally, I put air quotes around them, traditionally associated with what we would consider the feminine. And it's interesting in my own practice as a yoga practitioner. I do a lot of chanting. And so one of the, actually, who I've been chanting to recently is Durga. And Durga in sort of Hindu mythology she is the mother warrior. And Durga has 8, sometimes 10, but often 8 arms. And in her arms, she carries like a shield, and she carries an arrow, and she carries all these weapons, right? And then she also carries a conch shell, which is sort of like her ability to use her voice. And she's that mother energy, right? The mother warrior that shows up, that we can chant to within ourselves, or we can find within ourselves when we're doing something like recovering from an eating disorder. And it really is calling upon both the feminine and the masculine qualities, but oftentimes in our recovery programs, or even just me telling that story of mythology, that's very much like, sort of the storytelling. But oftentimes our approaches tend to lean a little bit more towards the fixing, doing, problem solving side of things, which is all good and helpful. But I think we need to balance it out a little bit. Yeah. So maybe that's why I use the feminine. Good question.
Did you want to say something, Sandy?
No, you go on.
I'm just curious, when you were in the midst of your eating disorder, what was the pivotal moment you decided to change? I'm just curious.
I don't think there's been one pivotal moment. Oftentimes when I talk about values or I talk about recovery, I use the metaphor of a guitar, right? And if you think about, guitars have these strings to them. And when a musician plays a guitar, the first thing they do is they tune it before they play. Like before you go on stage, you're going to tune up your guitar. And the way you tune a guitar is you play all the strings, and then you listen in and you hear whether one is out of tune. And then when you hear that something's out of tune, you make adjustments, right? But the nature of guitars is that they go out of tune just by like sitting around, right? So for me, recovery, the process of recovery is a continual tuning.
Yes.
And the out of tune may not be how it was out of tune when I was like severely in an eating disorder. But the out of tune now is I'm out of tune all the time. Like I need to get back in tune, right? I need to get back in tune of how I want to be as a daughter, or how I want to be as a clinician right now, right? And so I think that there isn't one pivotal moment in time, as much as there's a repeated return to a listening and remembering of what being tuned in and being aligned feels like to me. And I think that, one of the things they say in like AA rooms, or when I work with people that have other types of addiction recovery, they say our bottoms are bottomless. And so a lot of times people are trying to find that point when it's like, okay, now I really reached bottom and this is what's going to turn me around forever. And sometimes that's the case. You hear that with people, like a moment where there's this massive awakening and then they're done. I find that even if you have one of those, you're never really done.
Absolutely.
Constantly micro adjusting, moving around, going to this side, going to this side, going to this side.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wasn't sure if something had happened and just woke you up and said, I want to change. I want, to conquer this eating disorder, but not conquer it. But I mean, you know what I mean, not to work at it and not let it control
being
you.
recovered. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like that's a daily practice, a
Yes.
minute-to-minute practice.
Have you experienced a situation where ACT just doesn't work for someone?
Sure. I mean, and I don't know. I guess sort of the question is like, what does work mean? I mean, it's, as a therapist, there's moments where I've been engaging with clients and we haven't connected around something, or the shift hasn't happened. And I think some of that can be the fit, the fit with is a person at a point in their life when they want to do this work, or are they not at a point where they want to do this work, or the fit with me as a therapist, or am I mean, oftentimes I think like where ACT doesn't work is because I'm caught in psychological inflexibility as a therapist. I'm avoiding something. I'm not going there. I'm not asking the question because it's uncomfortable for me to ask the question. I mean, think about something like suicidal thoughts. It's really uncomfortable for all involved. Sexual assault, really uncomfortable. Racism, really uncomfortable. And it requires psychological flexibility to step into those conversations as a therapist or as a parent or as a friend. So I don't know if it's that ACT didn't work, or as much as like the humans that are for me as a human that engaging caught in my own human struggle.
We are almost out of time. Rebecca, is there anything else you want to bring up with Diana?
I love your approach to therapy, which combines both Eastern and Western medicine. I believe this is the way because it's not so black and white. Can you comment on that in the next few minutes that we have?
Well, actually, it's 1 minute, so it will be a quick comment.
Yeah, I would just say that I feel that I stand at the intersection of many wisdoms, the wisdom of neuroscience, the wisdom of contemplative practice, the wisdom of behavioral science, the wisdom of personal life experience, right? And the wisdom of many that have walked the path of struggle and also the path of liberation. And I'm just interested and curious about all these different avenues where they overlapped and intersect. And there's just it's just an ongoing learning process for me personally and professionally.
Do you have a couple of words you'd like to leave the audience?
I think just the sort of simplicity of remembering what matters to you, remembering to be present, remembering to tune in. Those would be sort of the simple words to end with. Yeah.
Diana, you're a wonderful example of your work. Your energy is very calm and gracious and flexible. And kudos to you.
Kudos to you. You did it.
Okay, so we're out of time now. If you want to know more about the book, you can go to Diana's website, which is DianaHill.com. I don't think I have to spell that out. The book is called ACT Daily Journal, Get Unstuck and Live Fully with Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. And we mustn't forget to credit also your co-author, Debbie Sorensen. And the book's published by New Harbinger Publications. Diana, thank you. It's been very instructive and very enjoyable to have you on the show today.
Very enlightening. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a delight and pleasure to be in your presence. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Crack the Podcast, Slaying the Dragons of Mental Health. Till then, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
And don't forget, there is a crack in everything. It's where the light gets in.